Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison, and I want to welcome you to this session of Humanity Rising. I want to begin today by just noting that yesterday marked, May 22nd, marked our third year anniversary at Humanity Rising. It was on May 22nd, 2020, in the depths of the pandemic, that we convened our first broadcast. And 3 years later, we're still standing and we're still expanding. And we've had several thousand speakers, hundreds of partnering organizations. We've had every conceivable issue of concern to humankind that we've covered one way or another. And so I just want to begin today by expressing my deep thanks to all of you who have been with us from the beginning, those of you who have joined as we've unfolded. I want to, in particular, thank Georg Bach, our technical wizard who keeps Zoom day by day. You know, Zoom has its own consciousness, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And Georg has been a master of keeping us broadcasting day after day after day. And I also want to acknowledge Stan Pokras, who has chronicled every single session. We've had over 700 sessions. And Stan has not only chronicled every session, but if you go to other networks, you'll see a capacity to look up every speaker, the chats, what was discussed, cross-referencing. I mean, it's been encyclopedic what Stan Pokras has done on behalf of Humanity Rising. I want to also acknowledge Shannon MacArthur, who day after day has been faithfully convening our after-session chat group, and to acknowledge all the rest of you who've been so faithful and supportive as we continue to grow and to fulfill our mission in a time of escalating chaos. How do we just bring humanity together in a way that's authentic, talking about issues that actually matter in a real way, and the way that you can ensure that you're always getting good information on Humanity Rising is it that doesn't come like CNN and BBC and MSNBC and, you know, Fox News from some corporate editorial board that are trying to make profits. Humanity Rising is comprised of frontline organizations, like we're going to hear today. And every day, who's on the front line working to make the world a better place? Those are the people that have the kind of information we need. And the whole mission of Humanity Rising is to enable frontline organizations working on the environment, working on democracy, working on technology, working on artificial intelligence, working on women's issues, youth issues, to have a platform that can give them a capacity to broadcast that information globally. That's why we're here. Because if you can provide that interconnection between frontline information and activity in a global distribution, you can mobilize more and more people to take action. And that's why our tagline, as we evolve into Humanity Rising Network, is don't just watch. You go to Netflix, all you do is watch. But on Humanity Rising Network, you don't just watch. We mobilize information in community, in real time, to empower people, to enable humanity to rise at this very critical moment. And one of the issues that we're going to take up today is an issue that we've been exploring from the very beginning, and that is the way technology, whether it's social media, whether it's artificial intelligence, even yesterday when we had a session on unidentified flying objects and the way extraterrestrial civilizations are using technology that we can't even imagine to visit our planet and to conduct surveillance on what it is that we're doing, something that's been publicly acknowledged now by the Department of Defense of the United States and the US government. And so all these different aspects of technology at a moment when humanity desperately needs solutions, and the tendency is to rely on a technical fix, when the reality is that there's no technology in the world anywhere that can save us without a commensurate change in human consciousness. Einstein was right that the consciousness that produced the problem cannot solve the problem. And so on Humanity Rising, in all of our sessions, we're always looking for the kind of catalytic change in consciousness that will empower us to utilize the solutions that are around. It's not that we don't have the solutions, it's that we don't have the consciousness to use the solutions wisely. And because of that, the technology that we do deploy, because it's at a lower level of consciousness, victimizes us, endangers us, rather than helps us. And it's in that conundrum, in that koan of consciousness and technology, problems and solutions, that Humanity Rising day by day just seeks to bring illumination so that our community can be empowered. Before we dive into this issue, which we've called Zombies Rising, interestingly enough, we are going to pause, as we always do, just to breathe together in a world of escalating chaos on the outside. The most important thing that we can do on the inside is just build our conscious coherence. And perhaps the most effective way to do that, particularly in a short period of time, is simply to consciously breathe. So the kind of breathing that we do on Humanity Rising is a breathing technology to induce higher coherent consciousness. So in the moment, you're going to hear the sound of a bell. And when you hear that bell, just breathe in, hear another bell, and breathe out. We're going to take 10 breaths together, and then we will begin our program. Thank you, everyone. Welcome to Humanity Rising. Thank you, everyone. It's so good to feel the coherence of conscious breathing together. So thank you all so much. And thank you all for your affirmations in the chat about Humanity Rising. It fills me with such deep gratitude for not only each and every one of you, but that we're able at this critical moment in human affairs to come together in such an extraordinary way with the single purpose of enabling humanity to rise. It gives me a clear conscience almost every day that I'm able to interact with all of you. And today, for example, two of the frontline organizations in the whole domain of public health is the Nordic Health 2030 and the Europe Health Futures Forum that over the past 18 months or so have convened, I think it is 15 different sessions on the health issues as we underwent the pandemic, looking at this from a European perspective. Lars, Munter, and David Somekh were the conveners. And so we're going to be rekindling the relationship and the programming with them. And we were going to start, as I mentioned, on the real issue of how the idealization of technology has now become an existential threat, and how we as a human race need to understand that and what we can do about it. So David Somekh, I want to thank you so much for everything that you've done. You've brought such a splendid group of deeply professional practitioners to all of your sessions. And I'm grateful that a number of them are back for this program. And I turn the program over to you.
Jim, thank you very much. Zuzanna, would you like to introduce yourself as well? So delighted to be back, and really sorry that Lars Munter can't be here. He's in Athens at the moment and is in a meeting. So Zuzanna, I'm delighted that Zuzanna Cichon can join us. She's been with us before on a couple of these sessions. She's joining us from Brussels, and she's our kind of guest presenter with me. So nice to see you, Zuzanna.
Thank you. Yep.
Go on. What were you going to say?
Yep.
Okay. Well, you're here. That's great. Look, the first thing we're going to do with the help of Georg is to play a video. Although Lars and I agreed that although he couldn't be here, he's saying a few words which really introduces the whole theme of this. I mean, Jim touched on the technology issue. I think we would say that there are twin issues here about zombies rising, both technology, but also the current, what we would call the dominant economic model. But let's hear from Lars now, if that's okay.
Hi, and welcome to another session of Humanity Rising. I'm not there live, but it's been my pleasure to host a lot of the sessions with the European Health Futures Forum and Nordic Health 2030 movement in the past. Therefore, I'm also happy to contribute to this particular session, where we're not actually only talking about Humanity Rising, but also the challenge of zombies. The problem with a part of our society these days are actually, of course, about the undead. The problem that some of our institutions, some of our foundations should actually be transformed towards the future of health. We see our healthcare institutions, some of our democratic institutions, some of our financial institutions, that they actually are more fit to be, dismantled, transformed, instead of being kept on eternal life support on a planet that can no longer actually live with their existence. We need to recognize the fact that we have zombies among us, zombies that we, are trying to live with, but it's challenging to live with zombies and keep your humanity at the same time. I've been fascinated for quite some time, especially on the topic of zombies, zombie movies, zombie series. What are they really about? They're not just simply about, they're also about how to keep your humanity when you see other people around you no longer seemingly part of the human race. How do you keep your humanity when others do not? And how can you collaborate towards a common goal when there's so many obstacles stacked in front of you? That is why today's session is about how to deal with zombies, because you need to know and understand how these challenging people, these challenging situations might be dealt with through the lens of thinking about undead zombies. Even though they should actually be no more, they are still here because something is still fueling their existence. Yet, obviously, we need to keep our humanity when we try to tackle with these problems. Acting with, respect, acting with urgency, of course, sometimes it can seem like a paradox. We need to act as fast as we can to save the planet. Yes, we also need to accept the fact that we, as humans, have a right and an obligation to be heard by others and to listen as well. What a lot of the participants today will be doing is, of course, to listen. I urge you to share your opinions in the chat, as many of them as you usually do. And I look forward to seeing the entire session or the recording of it when I can. And it's ironic, I suppose, that I'm not with you live. I have to beg you to trust me that I'm not a zombie, but passionately working elsewhere for the future of us all. And I hope with all the conversation about zombies that you'll reflect on how important it is to keep your humanity while you're tackling with obstacles far beyond what you should be doing. But it's needed for us all that we can figure out a way that we can jointly still keep our humanity while we rise to the challenges before us. Thank you.
That's great, Lars. Thank you very much indeed. So let's get straight on and introduce our first speaker. Zuzanna, would you like to introduce Caroline?
Yes. So we have with us today Caroline White, who has been involved with FISA, which is the Foundation for the Economics of Sustainability, since 2002. She studied ecological economics, and her master thesis was on the relationship between central banking and sustainability. She's a director of the Irish Environmental Network, and is FISA's alternate representative on the environmental pillar. She's also one of the three pillar members of the Irish National Economic and Social Council, and she's one of the founders of the Wellbeing Economic Alliance Irish Hub. She currently lives in central France, from where she edits the FISA website. So back to you, Caroline.
Thank you very much, Zuzanna, and it's great to see you, and thank you so much for inviting me tonight. So I'm going to do a screen share so that everyone can see my slides. Here we go, see if that works. Right. Sorry, I don't think that's quite right. Oh, yeah, hold on. Is that working all right? Could somebody just let me know, please? Is that okay?
There's some stuff in the background, Caroline, that's all.
Okay, hold on now. I think it did something funny. I'll try again. There's always something.
Sure.
How's that? Any better?
Yeah, that's it.
Great, perfect. Great. So to be here, I'm going to be focusing on the dominant economic model, as David called it, and hopefully the strong link will be clear as I talk about between the kind of economy we have and the technology that we're using, because I'm going to be arguing that our growth-obsessed economy encourages the development of particularly damaging and seductive forms of technology. And so the photo in this first slide I have, it's from the film Night of the Living Dead. And the film it's not explicitly about zombies. They never use the word zombie, but the monsters in it act very like zombies. And so it's kind of generally considered a zombie movie. And they're dead bodies which are insatiably hungry and they want to eat human flesh. And the film's about a small group of people in rural Pennsylvania who are trying to ward these zombies off. So I won't give away the plot in case anyone watching hasn't seen it. And I should warn you, if you don't like gore, it's probably not going to be your cup of tea. And it's also not the cheeriest tale either. But I do think it's worth at least reading the story and watching a few excerpts if you aren't familiar with it, as it's in its own hokey kind of way. It's actually quite clever and it has themes which seem very relevant now. So the film was made in a very low budget in 1968, which was a particularly turbulent year with the beginnings of the environmental movement and increasing questioning of the dominant economic model. And it was also a year of some big tragedies. There was the Vietnam War, which was at its height. There was a certain amount of disillusionment of the anti-materialist counterculture movement in the US and Europe with the assassinations of Robert Kennedy, Martin Luther King. There were protests and riots in Paris and Chicago and elsewhere, very major events. And the director of the film said it was designed to reflect the tensions of the time. And one of the most disturbing scenes in the film shows a small child who's died and she's been transformed into a monster, a zombie basically, and she's killing her parent with a trowel. And to me, this is really reminiscent of King Lear. It's ungrateful children turning on their parents, and it probably taps into a huge, if perhaps somewhat unconscious fear that a lot of people probably have. However, I think it highlights one of the three important differences between the film and the situation we're actually in now. So in the film, you have random dead people who become zombies and they attack living people. Sometimes they happen to be children. And in real life, keeping in mind this is a general pattern and there are exceptions in both directions, but generally speaking, the wealthy and the older generation is inadvertently using technology of all different kinds to hurt the financially vulnerable and the younger generation through things that range from more obvious things like frequent flying or luxury vehicles, use of luxury high energy technology, and slightly less obvious things, for example, treating housing as a commodity rather than basic need, and things that might not be obviously harmful at all on the surface, like private pension funds. But all of that is strongly connected to the fact that the economy is so growth oriented. So zombies are empty inside and insatiable, and in the same way, the economic system has an inner emptiness that can never be satisfied, hence the need for an endless expansion, which was alluded to by the Irish President Michael D. Higgins in a recent speech in which he was criticising economic policy and the way economics is taught in universities. And some prominent Irish economists took offence at this. I have the impression they assumed that the president was claiming they didn't care about the environment or about inequality. And just to be clear, I don't mean to imply any moral failings on the parts of individuals here. It's the economic goals and the measurements that are wrong. It's the system that's pushing us to behave like zombies. And you don't have to look very far to find examples of how the growth obsession is embedded into the language that politicians speak. A good example is Liz Truss from the UK recently. There are loads of examples from all across the political spectrum in different countries. And here I've just made a little collection. It didn't take very long to find these quotes from different places. So how does this fixation on growth manifest itself in the real world? Well, for example, the International Energy Agency in its scenarios for future energy use always assumes a growth rate of 2.8% per year up to 2050, even for its net zero scenario, which includes decarbonisation. So what does this mean in practice? Well, in practice, it means about 110% increase in gross world product by 2050. So that means over twice as much economic activity as there is now in the world. So say you have a road like this now. That means in 2050, you've got, roughly speaking, more than twice as much a road like that, if you're thinking in terms of roads or cars, for example. And you have to ask, is this really a better future than we have now? Even if we'd achieved decarbonisation and all these cars in the photo were electric, say, would this increase in traffic really be an improvement to quality of life? Now, on the European level, it's true that the growth target's a little bit more modest. So while the European Green Deal called itself as growth strategy, its projected growth rate to 2050 is 1.5% a year. A little bit better, right? Well, not really, because it translates into 50% more economic activity, which is still a lot. And do wealthy European countries really need 50% more of all these kinds of things? So, a very important question of whether everyone's getting access to the stuff they need, but that's a separate issue to the question of whether there's enough stuff to begin with. And we'll discuss that further later. But for now, the point is that there's already plenty of stuff in Europe. Now, some people might say I'm fighting a straw man here, basically, because growth in the number of cars or other stuff isn't actually the type of GDP growth that they have in mind that we need. So they're thinking of dematerialized growth that doesn't impact the environment at all. So they might argue, for example, that digitalization is leading to dematerialized growth. And to me, that's a very clear example of the idealization of technology. So they might point to graphs like this one, which is from Our World in Data, which shows that in the UK over the past few years, there's been a certain amount of decoupling between GDP and greenhouse gas emissions. Now, I certainly don't mean to dismiss all the work of Our World in Data. It does have some very useful and well-presented information, but unfortunately, it also includes some misinterpretations, like here, where the authors make a very sweeping generalization about economic growth based on a small handful of countries and absent any wider context. And in real life, there's really a very strong correlation between energy use, which is primarily fossil fuel, and GDP in countries all around the world. In this graph, that correlation is making more or less a straight line from the lower left to the upper right. And also, there's a strong correlation between other types of environmental damage and GDP growth. And if you're looking for more detailed information on the problems of trying to decouple emissions or other damage from growth, I recommend checking out Kate Raworth or Timotei Parik's talks from a recent conference on Beyond Growth that happened at the European Union Parliament last week. All the videos from it are online and they're really clear and well done. So Timotei Parik was also the main author of the book that's shown on the right here, and that gathers a wide body of evidence showing that decoupling of GDP growth from environmental damage is not going to happen on the scale that's necessary in the short time necessary we still have to act. So the European Environment Agency, among others, is saying now that societies actually need to rethink what's meant by growth and progress. And speaking of Kate Raworth, also, her economic donut is on this diagram. That's the green circle in the middle. And that shows how much trouble we're in, because the green bit, the donut, that's where we need to be. But we're breaching planetary boundaries like climate and biodiversity to a very dangerous extent, hence the red on the outside of the donut. And we're also failing to meet many people's social and physical needs, hence the red on the inside of the donut. So basically, we need to get rid of the red parts here. Now, some people might also counter that whether or not growth will always cause environmental damage, we still need it because there's no way we can have well-being without growth. So they'll say it's just human nature and we always just want more and more stuff. But again, research indicates that actually once the economy has reached a certain level of activity and production, the correlation between growth and well-being becomes much less strong. And we can see an example here from Ireland, my country, where a team from the NGO I work for, FASTA, teamed up with a German academic group and came up with a national well-being index. And it's just an approximation, of course, it's not a perfect measure, but still when you chart it against GDP in Ireland, you can see there have been times when GDP went up while the wellbeing index went down and vice versa, and similar results have been found elsewhere in the world. So well-being isn't inextricably linked to GDP growth. However, it is fair to say there are structural reasons for our dependency on GDP growth, structural dynamics that affect things like the money supply and the energy supply, and I'd argue that those are the things that are generating the economic zombies. So how can we stop the economic zombies? Here we come to a second difference between the film Night of the Living Dead and what's happening now. In the film, the way to stop the zombies is through fire, as you can see the main character doing here, who incidentally is the only person of colour in the film and by far the most level-headed person in the film as well. You can also, in the film, you can also use guns, you can beat zombies over the head as well. Personally, I wouldn't particularly recommend any of those methods for stopping the economic growth zombies. Violence really shouldn't be part of the toolkit, and fire is also a very bad idea given the climate crisis. As the climate campaigner Bill McKibben keeps saying, in a world on fire, stop burning things. So what should we do? I think we need to turn off some taps and plug some holes and plant some seeds. So I'm using a little bit of poetic license saying tap because I believe the technical term should be valve, actually. Phase down and in some cases phase out completely the extraction and import of resources whose use is destroying the environment. One obvious candidate for that is fossil fuels, giving their impact on the environment, on the climate. And in FASTA we have an initiative called Cap and Share, in which the supply of fossil fuels would be phased out at the point of extraction. And if this is done globally, carefully, it could actually strongly contribute to climate justice as well. And it ties in with the goals of the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty. But just capping fossil fuels isn't enough, because that risks displacing environmental damage elsewhere. With the energy transition and with digitalization, there's a huge increase in demand on other kinds of materials, like critical raw materials that are necessary for things like solar panels and smartphones. But their mining also causes an enormous amount of environmental damage. So we can't have a situation where there's infinite demand for mining. There needs to be limits, and there need to be caps on the extraction and use. Now, some people might ask, how will people's needs be satisfied if we limit resource extraction? And this is where it gets quite interesting, I think, because there's two groups of academic researchers in different parts of the world who've come to similar conclusions recently. Essentially, they found that current global energy consumption is almost 3 times higher than the energy that will be required to meet basic needs for all. So in other words, we actually don't need nearly as much energy as we're extracting at present. And that applies to other resource use too. And the graph in this picture, in this slide, shows a breakdown of current energy use and energy needs from different regions of the world. And there are some areas where people don't have enough energy on average, and others where people are using far more energy than they actually need. So the answer is obviously to distribute it more fairly and evenly. So how can we do that? Well, this is where we move on to plugging holes, and this is as important as turning off the taps. None of the caps on resources extractions that I've mentioned would be ethical to implement or even possible in political and practical terms without also plugging some holes. If we just bring in these kinds of caps by themselves, that would effectively turn us into eco-fascists, because we'd be imposing very strong and constraining rules without respecting people's fundamental rights and needs, such as the need to access energy. So by plugging holes, I'm thinking of stopping the leakage of money and vital resources away from the places where they're actually needed towards places where they're not needed. In the case of money, money has a tendency to flow to tax havens and to organize into dynamics of crippling and unpayable debt. And in the case of resources like energy, the graphs on the left of this diagram, they come from a paper by Jason Hickel and some other researchers, and they show just how unbalanced world trade is at present, with a massive flow of resources from the global south to the global north, despite the fact that there's already a glut of products in the global north and not enough in the global south. So we need to reform and democratize the international trade architecture, like the IMF, the World Trade Organization, the World Bank, and we also need to democratize money creation, and we need to end tax havens. And there's links to more information about all of these on the FASTA site, and to organizations like us who are working on all these things. And this is just a quote from the economist Mariana Mazzucato, just emphasizing the fact that debt is really important to look at as part of all of this. So as well as improving the overall global flow of money, we must take steps to keep it circulating for longer time on the local level so that local economies can flourish. And there are loads of time-tested ways to do that, and some of them are mentioned on this slide. And I also recommend watching another classic film, It's a Wonderful Life, to see an example of one of them, community banking. And there are working examples of all the other things too. And again, there's more information on our website and elsewhere about all of that. And now to zoom out a little bit further again, 2 other things we need to help plug the money holes, which are a little bit more top-down in nature, are universal basic income and services. In essence, these are a social investment. They're providing basic things which we all need to thrive, and since they're unconditional, they have no stigma attached, and they allow for flexibility and choice. For example, universal basic income would allow people who wish to look after small children or provide care in other ways to take a break from the production economy. There's a heavily gendered aspect to a lot of this kind of work, and we need to make sure that everyone in society can live in a dignified way, no matter what they're doing. And in the long run, everyone will benefit from this. So this just ties into what the Wellbeing Economy Alliance, which we're a member of, and David also, what they've identified as 5 basic needs that everybody has: fairness, nature, participation, connection, and dignity. And all of these things I've been talking about are intended to help contribute to those basic things. And now we come to what I hope will be the third and final difference between the film Night of the Living Dead and real life. And without giving away the plot of the film, I think I'll just mention that I'd say the ending is fairly cynical, let's say. And this photo shows a state park in Pennsylvania, and it's located quite close to the place where the film was made. It's a popular park with lots of hiking trails, and people can camp there. And the point I want to make about the park is that it's in an area that used to be a mine. The land was restored in the late 60s, soil was brought in the early 70s, so shortly after the film was released, and it was turned into a park which gradually acquired lots of biodiversity. So it's an example of how land can heal from former wounds. Pennsylvania is a swing state with very mixed voting patterns and a checkered history of heavy industry and pollution, combined with trailblazing environmental research and activism. John James Audubon and Rachel Carson were both from Pennsylvania, for example. So which way will the state turn in the future? It's a little bit like a miniature version of the whole world. Will there be more parks like this one? Will there be a higher quality of life overall? Or will the zombies of insatiable growth be allowed to continue to dominate? It's up to all of us to defeat the zombies by turning off taps, plugging holes and planting seeds. And this is our FAST theory of change, which brings together the ideas I mentioned in this talk, and you can find it on our website. Thank you very much for listening. Stop the share. Okay.
Caroline, thank you very much indeed. I know you had to rush through your presentation. It's ever thus, isn't it, for all of us? But very rich, and of course, this will all is being recorded, so people will be able to look at it at leisure if they want to on YouTube subsequently. Thanks to Jim and his team. So absolutely great. Thank you for that. Can we, perhaps the next thing is, I'm going to talk to Robert about a subject that I'm not an expert in, but he very much is. Would you like to put your video on, Robert? Hey. So this is an unscripted conversation that we're going to have because we both love talking anyway. But Robert Rubenstein was introduced to us a couple of years ago in one of our previous webinars, and really is an expert on investment, but of a particular kind, so-called ESG investment, but more really about investment that provides benefit to society as opposed to simply to a privileged few. But perhaps, can you expand on that, Robert, before we go into where the zombies come in?
Well, for the last 25 years, I've been I've been working to change the financial system so it works for all stakeholders, society, environment, and the investor, not only the investor, which is the way the system is and was. And fortunately, it's not really that hard to get the behavioral change. The challenge was always access, not the convincing. Because if you ask anyone, do you want a financial return with a social environmental added value, no one's going to say, no, I want all my money to make life miserable for everybody, and I'm working at that 24/7. So they don't think, well, it's just an educational issue. Unfortunately, over the 25 years that we've been operating, the financial sector has embraced ESG or impact or combination of the two, but it's the lowest common denominator of it. And ESG has just become a death march in the wrong direction, but slower. And that's the progress. Because you can't, it claims of 50 trillion going to ESG. If that was true, we'd have no problems that Caroline brought up very clearly in climate, carbon, food security, water, etc. So it's not going in there. It's just that everybody wants to say, hey, I have a membership card to the fitness club of ESG, but I never go to the gym to exercise. And that's unfortunately what it's been. It's politically correct to say you're part of it, but it's not changing anything. And to kind of build on what Caroline was saying about plugging the holes, according to the Swiss bank that went bankrupt, Credit Suisse, they publish a report every year. How much wealth is there in the world? And everyone is shocked when they hear the figure that in the last report, there's 4.6 times more wealth than GDP. So 4.6 pounds chasing every activity for business. A lot of it is in real estate, it's set in illiquid assets, but in general, there is more than enough money to transition, create a universal basic income, retool the environmental, the economic industrial base. And we've seen some positive notes. I mean, as horrible as the Ukraine war is, all of a sudden Europe reduced their energy consumption a third because the price went up. And people say, oh, I gotta, put my sweater on and lower the thermostat, it's too expensive. So there are a lot of zombie banks, there are a lot of zombie investors whose basic goal is to die rich as quickly as possible.
but we can turn it around and get off of this stupid merry-go-round of constant unnecessary growth, and get toward degrowth, green growth, post-growth, because the merry-go-round we're going on now is not working. It's working for a very small group, but it's not working for society. And I remember I was speaking last year at a conference, and at Catapult in Oslo, and the theme was how technology is going to fix everything. And I was the weirdo, in there. I was the George Carlin behind me, saying that I don't really believe that. And I said to them, the largest two employers in the world hardly use any technology, which is small-scale agriculture and hospitality. There's 1.4 billion working in small-scale agriculture and about 330 million in hospitality, and maybe 70 million working in technology. What are you going to do with the 1 billion youth unemployment? Are you going to all make them coders to make AI to code software? And they just were completely out of touch. They really, and I kept saying that technology has brought us convenience. It hasn't really improved our lives. Most people are stressed out. Most people have significant mental health issues. But it's brought us convenience. I mean, David, we've had lots of conversations. I've never met you, ever. We've had virtual conversations, and that has been helpful in kind of getting our story across. So it is helpful, but it is not the be all for everything. And I totally agree with Carolyn that we have to close the tax loopholes. That is 200 billion in wealth enough for the owner of LVMH? Does he need another 100 billion? Pay your taxes, and probably the stock market will go up because the balance of the governments will go down because they'll be finally plugging in some holes. So the financial sector is much of a zombie because it believes its own nonsense. If you just look at what everybody loves to talk about in our future, electric cars, okay? Electric cars and cars in general. If you look at the statistics in the United States, 50% of all trips with a car are less than 3 miles. 50%. If a car on average drives 15,000 to 19,000 kilometers on average, US is higher, some of it lower, that means it's traveling at 41 kilometers a day. Translate that means 20 hours a day it's parked. It's not being used. So all of this mining, all of these construction, all of this money pouring into making batteries and cars and things like, it's a complete stupidity. If you take a fraction of that and make public transport and more bicycle paths, it's a much lower impact on the society. But everybody seems to, the future is electric cars. Yeah, if we have 100% electric cars, we can hook them up for battery storage. We're not there, at all. So I'm very much about degrowth, and I think we have to look very, very carefully. I'm more for a cap and share system rather than a cap and trade system, that everyone gets a carbon allowance. And if you use your bike or the public transport, you can earn credits. If you want to use your SUV, you got to pay for it. And until we have products really reflecting their true cost, we're never really going to make a dent in what needs to be done. As Carolyn was saying, it's not going to happen because I don't know. I think in the UK, a bicycle is 21 or 25% VAT on if you buy a bicycle.
Yeah.
An airline ticket has no VAT, zero. None
Yes.
whatsoever. Not only the UK, but worldwide. And no tax on kerosene.
Can I
And
ask you?
airlines still lose money. So we just need to, you can adjust it, but if you're a politician and say, I'm sorry, it's not your right to fly with Ryanair and EasyJet for 10 euro to Amsterdam and vote for me, you see the challenges there. So unfortunately, I'm afraid that the pain has to be much greater before there is really a retooling. There's lots of chatter about impact and sustainability, but not that much check writing. If you look at one final point, if you look at climate tech investments, which have raised tens of billions of dollars, every single one of those, whether it's Texas Pacific Group, Generation Atlantic, and the 20 or 30 other ones that raise 100 million, none of them, not one, is investing in the cheapest, quickest, fastest way to draw down carbon, which is regenerative agriculture, restoring the health of the soil. Not one. And the reason why they're not doing it is because they are the zombie investors who basically want to chase unicorns. That's it, to get their 10x, to get their carry, to get their bonus. So as long as that system's in place, and most of the money is being sucked up by the tier one funds, who are just want to chase unicorns and pretending that they're fixing something. So it's important that people tell the zombie financial sector that their children are ugly, or that what they're doing is not fixing anything.
But tell me, let me stop you there. I mean, it's really, with your real knowledge of the financial system, it's really helpful to hear that analysis. I just wonder from a human point of view, and of course I'm going to be talking about it exactly what you're talking about, but from a slightly different angle. It's what you seem to be saying is, all right, one of the things that perpetuates this zombie aspect of finance is greed. We know that greed is good stuff, but
and
also
incentives. The incentive system is there.
Okay. But the other thing you were saying, really, I was impressed by, is this notion of believing in your, being deluded, believing in this mythology and not being able to break out of that belief system. And that's a really hard nut to crack, isn't it?
It is and it isn't. Basically, what I remember when I started with TBLI trying to educate asset owners, they always would ask me the same question. This was, you remember, 25 years ago, before there were the word ESG and impact existed, and PRI didn't exist and all of that. And they said, "Oh, Robert, this is interesting about sustainability. Do you have research that show there's no underperformance at worst or an outperformance at best?" And I stupidly used to send all the research because there was lots of research. And then I had the aha moment, which we all have. I realized this was not about proof. This was about belief. So I looked at, okay, let's say that there was research that shows, like this collateralized debt obligation that created the financial disaster. There was no research about that as a risk. And then I look at, well, how much money went into it? Everything. And then I just stopped. I stopped sending the research and focused on the three things the financial sector needs, because there is no group more predictable than the financial sector. They are just a bunch of alpha males and females who run up the hill and off the cliff. They are incentivized for short-term behavior. They're basically hunters, and you're trying to teach farming to hunters, but you can, and you have to show them self-interest, what's in it for me, opportunity, where can I invest, and three, the most important thing, money flows. So the money flows, the system of the financial sector, it's kind of like a car accident. When a car accident happens, a couple of people get around to take a look what's going on, and all of a sudden more people are over there, and then you've got this big crowd. That's the financial sector. So even when they're not interested, but if they see the money flows going in that direction, they will take a look. And if you focus on those three things, self-interest, opportunity, money flows, And if politicians would actually put in policy that basically incentivized degrowth and incentivize and have products reflect their true cost, then it can go faster. But without that in place, you have to focus on what they understand. And the mistake that many people make with the financial sector, one, they think that they're brilliant. They're not. 75% of their decisions are wrong. I said that once to the head of Goldman Sachs. I said, I have a feeling the investment manager is wrong half the time. He said, no, 3/4. So I was thinking, wow, would I go to a doctor, a dentist, a psychiatrist if 75% of their decisions were wrong, and I'm paying the person 4 times what they should be paid? So
in the States, anyway.
Yeah, don't think the financial people are so brilliant. Confront them, and you have to. And as long as they're incentivized for other behavior, remember they're hunters. Some are pirates, but in general, they're hunters, and you want them to be farmers. So you have to speak their language. Do not shout loudly in Swahili to someone who speaks Mandarin. They're not going to understand you. And that's key.
I think that's a terrific way to finish what you're saying, because I think it is about not speaking the language.
Yeah.
People not across a table, not understanding each other, not even realizing. No. No. Look, I must stop you there just because of time. I'd love to carry on. And anyway, we've got hopefully a bit longer at the end. But thanks so much, Robert.
Thank you for your time.
Well, it's great to have you. So I'm now going to do something weird, which is I'm going to ask Zuzanna to introduce me. And I'll do a little spiel about something that I'm bothered about.
Well, here is David Somekh. I think you all know him by now. He is the director of EHFF, which is the European Health Futures Forum. And he is a retired psychiatrist and a retired policy analyst also. There you go.
Thank you very much. Yes, I haven't quite retired from being a policy analyst yet. But,
sorry.
No, it's not your mistake. Okay, so I'm going to do a screen share now. So let me just get myself into slideshow mode. Here we go. And then I've got to, yeah, I've done it the wrong way around. Now I've got to come out.
Ooh, did we lose David?
I think we did.
He said he's coming out, but he's coming back in.
Oh, there he is.
Which one?
Is he with us? Oh, there you go.
I switched myself off. Dear God. Yes, I can't manage the technology, that's for sure. So apologies, everyone. Let me just get this thing up on the screen, and then I'll come back and do the other things. So, dear me. Profuse apologies to everyone. I'm so incompetent, but there you go. Here we go. So, slideshow. Okay, there we go. All right, then I go back to this one. That's it. Okay, lovely screen share. This is so pathetic, but there you go. Here we go. Right, here we go. Okay, so sorry about that. All right, so this is now something that I'm very bothered about, which is the effects of all of this on, if you like, the collective psyche. It's about how society is suffering because of the things that we're doing collectively. And let's move on. Oh dear, why is this not working now? Can't get the thing to move. So I'm going to come out of, if I can do this, sorry. This is not my day when it comes to presenting things. Let me go back into this. Sorry about this. This is just mad. I can't get up. Oh, I see. Let's go do this. It won't even allow me to stop sharing. Sorry, I couldn't make the slides move. I don't know why. So I'm going to do this in a different way then. I'll use this one. Okay, so let's try sharing again. It's a disaster, but then that's new. So now if I share this one, then at least I know I can move it. Okay, so here's the next slide then. What is it? Okay, I've got it finally. This is really embarrassing. Okay, so this is one of my favorite science fiction writers, China Miéville, and he wrote a book called The City and the City. The City and the City is it's an allegory about I think the world we're in now, which is there are two worlds that coexist, where citizens of both are not allowed to acknowledge their coexistence. It's kind of weird, but this is in part about the notion of a dystopian society. I'm just giving you the definition, but I guess you all know what it is anyway. And I'm taking as a first example Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. Brave New World, you know, was written in 1932, so a few years ago now. It's the ideas of a society years and years into centuries in the future, where a central state uses technology as a means of control over a society where science and efficiency dominate at the expense of human values. Sounds familiar? Now, the interesting thing is the means of subjugating people isn't violence and threat, as it is in the other well-known dystopian narrative, George Orwell's 1984. Instead, control is by means of mind-numbing pleasure, sex, drugs, and rock and roll, except in 1932 it was sex without sanctions, a universally available tranquilizer, a thing called Somekh, and mindless, ever-present entertainments called the feelies. Does that sound vaguely familiar? So, needless to say, it's made into a TV series. But the point is that government of New World, the Brave New World, retains control by making its citizens so happy and superficially fulfilled they don't care about their personal freedom. The consequences of state control, then, are a loss of dignity, morals, values, and emotions. In other words, a loss of humanity. So it was a satire, his take on the morals and mores in 1930, but it has uncomfortable similarities with our present society, where individual happiness is defined as the ability to satisfy needs, and success within society is equated with economic growth and prosperity. I think you'd agree that sums it up to some extent. But the real irony is that the Brave New World scenario has now been almost completely replicated for quite a few of us, but not by some world state, but simply as an outcome of the current economic models and values, the way the society is moving. So, and how did that happen? Well, I'm sure a number of you are familiar with the boiled frog syndrome. Things happen insidiously. It's how you kill off a frog by putting it in a saucepan and slowly heating it up. The frog adjusts to things without realizing until eventually it's boiled alive. So here we are, though. I mean, what are people's reactions to the current situation is we're looking after our families. Natural, isn't it? We want to enjoy our creature comforts. Isn't that what life's for or about? And we know we're a lot better off than previous generations, but let's keep it that way. However, there is a parallel universe. And again, as you well know, so in the parallel universe, these are just extracts. I could have taken any number of examples of how unhappy and troubled our society is, despite all this pleasure in things and entertainments and so on, is here's the US Surgeon General talking about an epidemic of loneliness, and quite rightly saying lack of social connection is as serious a risk to health as obesity or tobacco use. Here's the British BMA, British Medical Association, saying there are shameful, and these are, this last 12 months. Shameful statistics show a mental health crisis that's spiraling out of control as demand far outweighs capacity. Then we've got the American Center for Disease Control and Prevention issuing a statement. The drug overdose epidemic continues to worsen in the United States, fueled not just by illegal drugs, but huge prescribing of medicines like the opioids. And of course, we have social media. We already touched on that. So social media brings huge benefits. It connects people. It provides a sense of a different kind of community. But there's also this very uncomfortable trend that social media magnifies widespread intolerance. And again, hypocritically using the cloak of being in support of respect and diversity, but in fact being the exact opposite. And examples of that are no platforming, death by tweet. What I mean by that is, somebody puts a stupid and impulsive tweet up, and it's taken and used against them and it often destroys their careers just for some stupid act. And similarly, people actually go as far as dredging up adolescent. I mean, who hasn't been stupid as an adolescent and done something they've regretted afterwards? But people dredge them up and use them to damage people's careers using social media as a vehicle. And of course, we have fake news. The most interesting thing about fake news, I think, is that there's evidence that shows that the false information spread over social media has much greater penetration than real news. It is quite extraordinary, but bad news for a society. So let's look at the two coexisting sides of our life and see if we can make sense of how they happened. After all, the whole thing about a zombie is that it's the enemy of life. The living dead have no soul, but somehow they're all around us. Now, I'm a scientist, so how do we translate things like soul in practical terms? Now, let's just look at this. First of all, the everybody happy now scenario. That was the movie of Brave New World. This, of course, is the golden calf. The dominant economic model proposes limitless growth with trickle-down wealth, which benefits all. That's the story. But unfortunately, it's nothing like that in reality, although there are quite a lot of people, as we're discussing with Robert, who seem to believe the golden calf's promise and feel good about it. Whereas actually, the reality is there that mindless pursuit of wealth creates greater inequality, not less, but also harms the planet via its extractive aspects, to put just for one example, but also within it, there's this, sorry, someone will take that away in a minute, but also it embodies the intrinsic values of competitiveness and egocentricity. Sorry. It's not my day, is it? This life-draining ethic of the wealth economy was beautifully dealt with via Tim Jackson, the philosopher and eco-economist. That's his book, Prosperity Without Growth. But he actually spoke at the same conference that Caroline was referring to, and I attended virtually. And he makes a very good point about the question of humanity. He talked about care as being a crucial aspect of society. And he says, care is an anathema to capitalism. Its virtues are capitalism's vice. Its employment-rich foundation for well-being is capitalism's productivity crisis. Yet without care, we're nothing. Our progress is nothing. Without care, there's no economy. It's an interesting thought. So that's one thing. On the other hand, I think the major threat to our humanity is technology, as prefigured by Huxley's book in 1930. My understanding of the fracturing of society described previously with the erosion of human values catalyzed by fear and anxiety can be understood in terms of the rapidly accelerating development of technology and its effect on social structures and the collective psyche. And that's really the last phase of this talk. So here is Future Shock, and here's Alvin Toffler, the author, published 50 years ago, And Toffler was an amazing futurist in terms of the things he predicted. And just to go on and explain more about what future shock is, he said a move to a super-industrial society will produce a change that overwhelms people. He argued that the accelerated rate of technology and social change leaves people disconnected, suffering from shattering stress and disorientation, future shocked. He believed that the majority of social problems are going to be related to this future shock. And it's actually a development of, there's a guy called William F. Ogburn, who wrote a book on social change 100 years ago, where he speaks of cultural lag. And the notion is material culture evolves rapidly and expansively, but human culture is slower to adapt to change. So, and this creates tensions and disconnection within society. Now, he was talking at that time about what he observed about the automobile and it displacing horses and how society responded to that. Of course, what we see now is a much faster, huge acceleration of technology. So the cultural lag you would expect is much greater and its impact on society. Now, this is my very last bit. So this is about something about the brain. So this is a very interesting book published about 10, 15 years ago by a guy called Ian Gilchrist, both a psychiatrist actually, but also someone with very profound learning. He talks about the functions of the two parts of the brain. He says for most people, and this is neuropsychology, something we all understand, it's not controversial, but he says, the left brain, for most of us, if they're right-hander, deals with executive function. The left brain helps, it's the motor functions, doing stuff and attention and so forth. The right brain, on the other hand, he says grounds experience. It represents things holistically, while the other unpacks that experience into detail and then feeds it back into the right brain to be integrated into a new whole. So the left, in a sense, is the servant of the right, but it's also its emissary in the outside world, the one that's seen doing things. Now, what that heavy stuff means is that what dominates the left brain is the detail of the external world, which it can interpret. The right brain, on the other hand, is all about those functions, imagination, creativity, and intuition. And normally the two work together well, but it's the right brain, we would say, was what makes us human, gives us soul. Sure, as humans, we're very good at making things and doing stuff, but we also have to have those other faculties, which if you like, leaven the other one. And he warns of the danger of a world where left brain mediated behavior overwhelms the influence of the right brain. He describes the right brain as the one that believes but does not know. In other words, this is all about intuition, isn't it? But it has to place itself in a position of vulnerability to the one that knows but doesn't believe in order to be in the real world. The master needs to trust their emissary, knowing that such trust could be abused. The emissary knows, but knows wrongly that they're invulnerable. So what's the consequence of that? If, as I'm suggesting, it's happening, this betrayal, disregard of the big picture leads to increasing specialization and loss of generalists. Expertise, knowledge from experience and wisdom are sidelined by information gathering and standardization. Controls overvalued to the extent we even challenge death as not necessarily inevitable, which is hand in hand with the loss of respect for the rhythms of nature. Quantity prevails over quality in production. And worse still, the left hemisphere prefers the impersonal to the personal. It's something you can define. A focus on material over living leads to neglect of social cohesion, collaboration, or even altruism, essentials in a healthy society. So just to sum it up, I think that the crucial losses then that happens in what amounts to a two-dimensional world where speed and growth allow no space for contemplation or dreaming is a loss of empathy. the ability to appreciate metaphor and nuance. But we're human beings still, and even though people have pressed to deny their instincts, one human instinct, the survival mechanism, if you like, is to exteriorize threats that are there, but are sort of are denied consciously into horror stories or dreams, like the zombie movies. Things that go bump in the night should be heeded. They tell us things about ourselves, realities we have difficulty facing in our everyday lives. Okay, well, I've gone on far too long, but thank you for listening. And I hope by now we've been joined by Daniel. Ah, there he is. Daniel, hey! Delighted to see you. You've been very patient waiting. So you would like to talk to us, I think, about the zombies in healthcare.
Indeed. First of all, thank you very much for, again, inviting me to participate in this forum. I'm sorry that I didn't attend from the beginning. Unfortunately, I had another previous engagement. I'll share my screen and hopefully that's going to work. Share my screen. I will hear from you, I am sure, if there are any problems. What you should see now is a slide, and I'll go here. A slide that says "From Zombies to Superheroes, Transforming Healthcare."
Perfect.
Okay, excellent. So David knows very well that he talked to me about this, and I wasn't his first choice. He was choosing somebody that was more younger, very, very much more attractive than I was, and I was hoping that this topic would go away. Because from my personal point of view, zombies is not my preferred horror character at all. When I was growing up, I was much more interested in Dracula, Count Dracula, Bram Stoker's Dracula. I don't know why. I'm sure David can explain to me why. Maybe Dracula was more romantic or more suave and dressed better or whatever. But this topic came back to me because number one, preference was not able to do it. So then thinking about it, it seems to come together for healthcare. So what I'm going to do is show you a couple of slides. I try to keep it fairly short and share you some of my insights. I'm delighted, obviously, to take questions and debate. And I hope I got it right. So from zombies to superheroes, transforming healthcare. And by the way, my name is Daniel Steenstra. I have to tell you the other reason why I was happy not to be considered to do this in the first instance, because I'm currently on my lovely little sailing boat in Croatia, sailing the Croatian coast. And I'm saying this for a reason, because I'll show a slide later on that I will refer to. So bear in mind, I'm on a sailing boat in a nature reserve in Croatia at the moment. So, see if this works. Why doesn't this work? I need to do this. Okay. Imagine a world where healthcare systems resemble zombies, lifeless and devoid of humanity. I heard David talk about the film that I was going to refer to is Shrek 1, where, if you remember the opening of the movie, where Shrek sits on his toilet and reads about all sorts of fairy tales and then says, what a load of... Okay, bear that in mind, because I think we're already there. We don't have to imagine a world where healthcare systems resemble zombies. They already do. Okay, that's a key point. So I want to introduce, first of all, I'm sure one of the other speakers will have done this, but I want to quote the Cambridge Dictionary and say what actually is a zombie. And here you got quite a scary example of a zombie, a frightening creature that is a dead person who has been brought back to life, but without human qualities. Zombies are not able to think, and they're often shown as attacking and eating human beings. Don't like zombies at all. Anyway, so what I want to talk to you about is, or share with you, is the failures, the obvious, evident failures of the current healthcare systems, and COVID has really ruthlessly exposed those failures. And who are the victims then? If you think about these horror characters, they have victims, and bear a thought about the victims of the zombie apocalypse, and they are in unexpected corners. And when you think about horror characters, you also think about the superheroes, and with superpowers. How can we deal with these zombies? With Dracula was easy. You just ate a lot of garlic, and you made sure you had a wooden stick and a wooden hammer. But how do we deal with zombies? Who are the superheroes, and what are the superpowers that they need? And how do we unlock those superpowers? And then obviously wrapping up and thinking about the next steps. I need to click this. Okay, so interestingly, this is a slide I've used for many years, but I can't find it because this seems to be something that nobody wants to share, nobody wants to talk about. So what you have here on the bottom line is time, and this gives you an indication where we are. This is the COVID period, and clearly the COVID period isn't over yet, but this is the peak of COVID. And this shows, I think, the root cause of what healthcare is actually having to deal with, maybe from an economic point of view. So here, vertically, dollars. Sorry, I need to go back because I want. No. Here on the vertical, dollars as the expression of a unit, in this case, dollars of supply and demand. If you look at the supply, the scary thing with healthcare, and this really scares me, zombies I know doesn't exist, this does exist, and this scares me. The supply of healthcare is completely out of step with the demand of healthcare. The demand of healthcare we don't even know, we can't measure. We know that since COVID happened, it increased even more. But this is an unknown quantity because we can't satisfy the demand. We don't even know how big this demand is. And this is the supply. So this is the doctors, the nurses, the hospitals, the infrastructure, and everything else. And what you can see is there's a gap. And nobody measures the gap because we can't. But what we do know intuitively that this gap is getting bigger. And what you see here, after COVID, we know this, if you look at the newspapers, lots of practitioners have been so disenchanted with the way the system has treated them that we are actually losing healthcare practitioners. So I'm showing this as a horizontal, it might go down. So this is a huge gap, and it explains maybe what we're seeing. The other point is that just tinkering with the system, just saying, we make everybody a little bit more efficient and so on, is not going to work. We tried this for many years. So improving efficiency is not going to do it. It's insufficient, and what we need is a complete system transformation. Every single element, every single component, every single part of this system needs to dramatically change. Look at this. Before the French gentleman Laennec invented the stethoscope, healthcare was delivered close to where people were, and very close, as you can see on this picture. So we went, people like David and me, healthcare practitioners, we went to where the patients were, into the community. But then the French, the stethoscope, more technology, and now healthcare relies on what I call the temples of technology. If somebody wants healthcare, they probably need to travel, if they can afford it, to a hospital where they're going to be surrounded with all sorts of technology. So this is one of the major trends, and it's going back to the zombie analogy. This sort of happened. Nobody was in control of this. This was technology driving this change, removing healthcare from where it should be, close to us, close to where we are. Now, we know the data. I just thought it was a good idea to show some data anyway. Who are the victims of this? Who are the victims of this zombie system? And this is just some US data. Clearly, you will understand that every country has its own data, but it's a quarter of the US population is underserved. So 88 million people in the US don't have access to primary care, and 141 million people really could do with better mental health. And this is US government data. And this is huge, absolutely incredible. And this is just one country. So if you extrapolate this over the whole world, you can see that there are many, many victims of zombie healthcare systems. More data. So this is the Kaiser Foundation. This is not post-COVID, during COVID. And as we know, if you look at the mortality rate of COVID, and it hits Black people, Hispanic people, Native Hawaiian, Native American, American Indian people, and so much harder than white people. We know this data. So it's not just the zombies seem to select their victims depending on color even. They seem to have an appetite for non-white people. And this is where we find the victims. And this is obviously the churchyard. So the victim of the zombie systems are unfortunately here. Now, bearing in mind that I'm currently on a boat, so I've been sailing for the best part of my life, and this is another picture that scares me. I don't like this notion that a ship can go down. Now, I started to use this picture of the Titanic going down probably about 10 years when I was speaking with people in the UK. Most of my career in healthcare innovation played off in the UK, and I've shared this picture with at presentations and so on, and saying, hey, the NHS, the National Health Service, is the Titanic. It's been hit by the iceberg. And I'm very sad to state here and now, that if you read the press in the UK, unfortunately, people like David and I were right. It takes 48 hours to wait for an ambulance for certain cases. It's gone, it's finished. The National Health Service is a sinking ship, and we have to concentrate on getting lifeboats ready for saving as many people as we can. So this was a zombie system. And this is unexpected because the victims are not just the people, the victims are products as well. So in my past experience, I've been CEO of a medical device company, and we had lots and lots of ideas. We prototyped these ideas and so on, and we were not the only ones. So in the world, there are so many potential healthcare innovations stored in warehouses. And every day, if you read the specialist press, we add to them. New science, new inventions are coming up every day. We still are dealing with major crises, and we don't still be able to offer solutions in mental health, in diabetes, in musculoskeletal, but in the meantime, we keep on funding companies, we keep on funding academics to come up with yet more solutions to park in this huge warehouse of potential solutions. So these are victims too. Now, you talk about scary characters, about horror characters, and obviously then, who is going to fight them? Who are going to be the people that's going to be the superheroes, and how are they going to do this? I call them the healthcare transformers, and here's a picture of some of these characters. What do they need? What are the characteristics? And I think we can predict what they need to be able to do. They need to be innovators. They need to be able to come up with different ideas, different solutions, different prototypes. They need to have empathy. They need to understand what it feels. They need to feel for us. They need to be able to put themselves in our position. Because the challenge of healthcare is so multidimensional. None of these superheroes can do this by themselves. They need to collaborate. They need to be obviously patient-centric instead of system-centric, instead of hospital-centric. It needs to go back to to where the patients are. It needs to be community focused, and obviously, last but certainly not least, they need to be leaders. Now, who are these superheroes, and how are we going to enable them? My suggestion would be, if you want to know who the superheroes are, is find a mirror. Doesn't matter if it's a small mirror or a big mirror, but look into it. I think that's where you find the superheroes. They are already all around us. They just need to be enabled, empowered, and equipped to be able to do the superhero jobs. So they're already there. They are the healthcare practitioners. They are the midwives, the nurses. They are the chemists down the corner. And so on. They are ourselves, us. We have potential to deal with our own healthcare and well-being. So this is another quote I've used for many years. This is by Don Berwick. Don Berwick is the former president of the Institute for Healthcare Improvement and the administrator of the Center for Medicaid and Medicare. He was an advisor to the Obama administration. And what he said, that healthcare is broken. We have set up a delivery system that is fragmented, unsafe, not patient-centered, full of waste, and unreliable. Despite the best efforts of the workforce, we built it wrong. I think the key for me is in the last four words, we built it wrong. But I think we built it wrong because we didn't design it. It is a system that has evolved as a system by itself, by zombies, without any design. And therein lies the clue for the superpower. So 2 years ago, I had the privilege to be part of this forum, and I'm sure you won't remember. You might not have even seen it, but this was a key slide that I shared then. In my book, design is the superpower that everybody needs because it allows you to challenge status quo, it allows you to take ownership, and it allows you to change it. It allows you to dream, it allows you to make those dreams reality. So design is a superpower. So what does design do? What is it? If there's a need here, and there's a potential way of dealing with that need, of solving that need, what design is a system approach of strategies, processes, people, and enablers. So stuff like technology and so on that identify these needs and provide solutions for these needs. So that's what design is. It's big. It's not about making things look pretty at all. It's fundamentally, deeply understanding what is the problem, who has the need. And the thing I need to say also, design is very much vision-led. There needs to be a dream behind there. You know, what is your dream? David will remember that I fell foul of this model before, and I'm not giving up. This is a model that was described first by the Design Council in the UK. And it's to me, the more I use it, the more I think this is actually describing in hopefully an accessible way what the design approach is. It's the double diamonds. So this shows a process, sequential process of diverging and converging. So first you discover what's going on, who's got the problem, and then you define the requirements. So you define the right problem or the opportunity. And then after you've done this, you have a good understanding of what is required. Obviously, you then start designing, finding the right solution, doing prototyping, verifying, co-creation, co-design, and so on. And once you find the right solution, you develop and make that available. It's critical to see that the two diamonds are about the same size. Just imagine that you have a very small diamond, so you think, oh, I know what's going on here, I know the problem. You can hopefully see that sooner or later, it's not going to work in the second diamond either. So you really need to spend a lot of time, a lot of effort, and understanding, using empathy and so on in the discovery and defining. So how does this apply to healthcare? The current situation, which is really, really bad, wherever you are in every corner of the world, and this is where we want to get to. So this is effective, equitable, sustainable healthcare. And how do we get there? This is important. This is obviously the patient, us, the people, and these are the stakeholders in healthcare. As David didn't allude to, but I have some experience in automotive. I spent 11 years in the car industry. Automotive is a delightfully simple business because all you have is a supply chain and only one stakeholder. It's me or your partner. You know, if I don't like the car, if my partner doesn't like the car, we're not going to buy it. Healthcare is wicked. We have so many stakeholders, and each of them has a very important role to play. We have the regulators, we have the industry, we have the healthcare practitioners, we have politicians. Sorry, I wasn't supposed to swear during this presentation. You have all sorts of stakeholders, and all these stakeholders are critical to the success of healthcare. So somehow they need to be involved and participate in this as well. So here it is: design and innovation are chicken and egg. Without design, there won't be any innovation. Design is the chicken, and innovation is the egg, is the product. So this is how it hangs together. It's a bit simple. There's a lot more to it, but I think it's going beyond the scope of the 15 minutes that I've been allocated. Current situation: you dream, you have your vision, you'd use your design process to double diamond to get to innovation and transformation and get to effective, equitable, sustainable healthcare. And bearing in mind, making sure that this is an inclusive, collaborative process whereby all the stakeholders are involved. And it's complex, but it's possible. So I told you it was going to be brief. So this is the conclusion and next steps. There is an urgent is not expressing it properly. It's a desperate need for healthcare transformation. It needed to happen yesterday, and it's us that we have to do this. And so we need to empower people with design. Told you I'm on my boat in Croatia. I just had a conversation with my dear wife. My dear wife has been educating young kids on design for her life. And I said to her, is design something that you're born with, or can you learn design? And she is convinced, and she's right, that actually with the right education, anybody can become, we can become designers. So it's not something that you're born with. We can design an education experience. There, the word comes back again. We can design experiential education so that young people understand what design is and make it their own. So with design to become healthcare superheroes, we need to obviously build healthcare from the bottom up. We need to start where there's nothing. We need to go where there's no healthcare at all. So we need to be engaged in grassroots initiatives, and we need to support organizations working towards healthcare transformation. And only then can we disrupt the zombies. Okay, that was the end of my presentation. I hope that that was useful. And what do I do now?
You don't do anything other than say, receive our thanks, Daniel.
Okay, that's fine. I'm happy to.
And perhaps, I know we've run over time, but we're gonna, Jim's given us permission at least to go for a few more minutes. Caroline and Robert, do you want to also join in and just share a few words together? Do you want to put your videos on?
Mm-hmm.
Hi there. Look, it's I think it's something we talked about before we came on, really in the rehearsal room, as it were, which is we know there are these terrible problems, whether you define it in terms of zombies or whatever, but the truth is there are these, and again, like Robert was saying about how difficult it is to disrupt an illusion or, you know, a fixation on something. How on earth do we act? I mean, Jim said something right at the beginning, I think, about how people have to work together and so on. We all agree with that. And it's, again, it's something that's antithetical to some of the things that we're having to fight against. But what on earth do we do, you know, to try and make this better? I mean, I suppose, I don't know, I can think of some things, but I mean, we can obviously embrace the idea of design. We can work away, you know, like people like Robert and Caroline have, in pushing a particular area of this that they know a lot about and can change, can see how it could be changed. But it's almost like voices crying in the wilderness, isn't it? It's such a huge challenge.
It's farming, not hunting. So as long as you keep that focus, you'll see a consistent progress. And you have to pick your fights. You know, don't waste your time. You know, if the door is closed and there's lots of other doors that that are open, and you have to be far less politically correct. I meet so many people that are refusing to confront the powers that be with the bullshit that they put out there just to be part of. I want to hang out with them. I want to go on their plane. I want to be accepted in the press conference, and that's not getting anywhere because you're not changing any behavior. And far too many people are just not willing to confront and speak the radical truth that needs to be said. You were talking about healthcare innovation. We have clients who are doing incredible things in investment in health technology innovation, making it more affordable to a vast number of people. Nobody wants to put money in that. It's an emerging manager. And you go to all of the fund managers there. So we have to be more confrontational in a polite way, and not be afraid to be not invited because we're, you know, going to disrupt the order. Far too many are just not willing to say, sorry, your children are ugly. And what you're doing is not achieving anything. So I'm more for a more of aggressive approach, which, you know, people don't like to have George Carlin or the Marx Brothers confronting them. But that's okay. You know, there's lots and lots of wonderful, brilliant people that are trying to change the system. Fortunately, the group that we chose is a very small concentration of wealth in a very few hands. So I don't have to try to convince millions of people.
Okay, so that's one thing. Which I agreed what leads from that is I was interested in Tim Jackson, and his closing speech at this conference talked about the importance of recognizing the need for struggle. There's no doubt about it. It's not going to happen unless people really fight. But what I was struck by, and Caroline would agree, I'm sure, is the audience was extraordinarily young. In fact, even the European MPs who put on the show, who are kind of the head of the Green Party for a start, they're a minority group, but the auditorium was full of young people cheering and waving, you know, because they were so behind the thing. I just wondered, Zuzanna, I hate to do this ageist thing, but, you know, as the youngest person in the room, you have your own views, I'm sure, about how one tackles these problems.
Yeah, I mean, it's It's I think the younger generation, I heard in one of the presentations about the buying versus sharing process. I think the younger generations now are a lot more into the sharing idea. We do that with you know, the houses. Like, young people don't buy houses anymore, at least here in Belgium. That's not happening. Same with cars, with everything. So I think that's what the younger generation now does. Yeah, I don't have a like a clear response for you guys. I'm wondering, because I saw in many of your presentations also that we all say that it's never personal, like we never do that on purpose, but society makes us do it. So how do we change that? Because we all can do many things on a personal level. We all can create wonderful things, I'm sure. How do we now make the society go in the same direction? You know what I mean?
Let's bring in Caroline, because Caroline's a great campaigner, both for environmental justice, but also for a more sensible economy. I mean, what is there? We all agree it's a messy problem. It's what people call messy problems. So there's no simple solution. But what are the kinds of things you think answer Zuzanna's question about how it is about changing society? It's about transformation, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of an illusion that we're voices in the wilderness. That if there's a small minority of people, as has been said, who are benefiting from the way things are, but they have a very big platform and they dominate the media and so on. So we have the impression that we're all by ourselves all over the place. But in fact, we're actually the majority. If you look at, the Wellbeing Economy Alliance and the research they've done about people's needs, that little summary I had at the end about everybody needing dignity and fairness and so on, that actually, I mean, that's a global phenomenon. I mean, most people are, that's what most people have as goals and priorities and so on. So I think we aren't as isolated as we might feel, and that's it's quite helpful to remember, for me anyway, to keep that in mind. And then if we can figure out a few things that we all, would like to prioritize and be very clear about that, that's already something. It's not easy necessarily, but it's something, I think. Just I'm interested. I also think the power of narratives and storytelling as a way to both to keep ourselves going emotionally and also to share with each other is really important. When I was listening to the very interesting presentation there by Daniel, I was thinking about the novel Damon Copperhead. I don't know if any of you have read it, by Barbara Kingsolver. It's her most recent novel, and it's about the opioid crisis in Middle America. And it's I found it quite riveting. She kind of based it on David Copperfield, Dickens' book. So it's not only about the opioid crisis; it's also about things like child labor and the economic system. There's loads of different themes in it, but that kind of a story that brings together a lot of elements is like a platform. It gives you something to talk about and to develop common ground with other people. So bringing in that sort of power of narrative. There's been loads of references today to different art and stories. David also mentioned a lot of that as well, and that's, I think, that really helpful as well, as a way to find ways that we can all speak the same language, as Robert mentioned as well. So oh, sorry, the book somebody mentioned in the book that asked about the book is called Damon Copperhead. I'll put it in the chat. I'll put the name in the chat.
Can I just say something in the meantime, because as already made clear, I'm in Croatia and I'm meeting people here, and my wife and I are climate activists as well as, and although there's a heap of work to be done, there's a consciousness everywhere. We went to have a cup of coffee here and asked if it was organic. Yes, of course it's organic. My son is an agricultural engineer, and so on. Healthcare, I would argue, the victims are immediate of bad healthcare. Yet there is no way. I don't see Greta Thunberg in healthcare. I don't see Extinction Rebellion in healthcare at all. And I wonder, why is that? So there's lots of growing activism all over the place in unexpected places about climate change and environment. On the economy, the same thing. You know, you got, and I didn't really want to mention this, but Web3, if you and I want to, after the banking crisis in 2008, a bunch of people have invented Web3, and if you and I want, we can set up our own cryptocurrency. Screw the banks.
Mm.
So the economy is being challenged because it's not as strictly institutionalized as healthcare is. So healthcare, I would argue, has immediate victims and is not challenged. We don't challenge healthcare. So clearly they are related. You can't separate healthcare from climate and from economy and so on and so on. But out of this whole system, healthcare has a special place because the zombies go unchallenged.
Mm.
I want to thank everyone for this conversation and just quickly summarize it in the following way. I'd like to, start with what you just said, Carolyn. I think it's very important on most matters to take in that the majority of the people actually agree with us. If it's, for example, on the gun issue in the United States, 80% of the American public, including most gun owners, believe that we need far more restrictive gun laws. The public, even with the mass propaganda around Ukraine, is increasingly skeptical. The problem is that the institutions are increasingly divorced from public opinion. And they are using both mass propaganda in terms of the mass media, but also very concertedly and increasingly eliminating dissent from the prevailing narratives. So it's increasingly difficult to make a connection between the polling on an issue and actual change, because the change mechanisms are controlled by the very corporate and military forces that are sustaining the dichotomy in the first place. So you have a real deep contradiction that we wrestle with on Humanity Rising all the time, between what people know and what is possible to do in a corporate controlled political environment. And in the United States, for example, where both parties are completely consumed with support for the war machine. And so that leads to the comment that you made earlier, Robert, about not being polite anymore. I think we're in a moment in history where, as Extinction Rebellion and other organizations are increasingly saying, we need to speak truth to power in a way that dispenses with the comfort that the people in power require, so they're not unduly disturbed and have to change anything. And how we do that is also increasingly challenging, because more and more countries, starting with Great Britain and the United States and France and Germany, are making any meaningful protest almost impossible without major criminal penalties. It's not like in the 60s where you could go out and just protest the war, or like Martin Luther King, protest civil rights. If you did what they did now, you can be put in prison for a seriously long time. And as you saw what the Canadian government did with the truckers that were protesting COVID, they not only shut them down and hauled them away, but broke into their bank accounts and depleted their bank accounts of money. So the capacity of the prevailing elites cannot be overestimated. And I think that the point that you were making in your remark, Daniel, is also important to note. The system is broken for a reason, because it serves the corporate interests. You know, the opioid crisis in the United States, for example, is by design. You know, Naomi Klein calls it, disaster capitalism. So that the brokenness is in part because there has never been an application of design, but more fundamentally, the design of a better healthcare system is obstructed by the very corporate elements and aspects and political aspects that profit from its brokenness. So we're in a situation, sort of as I've said at the beginning of my remarks, where awareness, change, and design are more and more desperately needed, but also more and more systematically blocked. And how we as the people of the world break through that in a timely manner is, I think, the $64,000 question. One of the reasons why I've been working increasingly to get Bobby Kennedy Jr. Nominated by the Democratic Party and elected president of the United States. I know that doesn't impact Europe, but if you could get a Kennedy in the White House right now, it would impact Europe, because I think we would find a pathway to peace in Ukraine. And I think in terms of environmental policies, he would bring exactly what the United States needs at the level of the Oval Office. So as I've been thinking of what could one possibly do under the current world circumstances and the paralysis that is blocking any meaningful change, whether it's on war or climate change, as we confront the reality that we're about ready to punch through the 1.5 degrees centigrade rise over pre-industrial levels, up pops Bobby Kennedy Jr. running for president. And so I would conclude by just saying that it's true that the consciousness that produced the problem can't solve the problem. And that applies not only for the problem makers, but for the movement. So I think we have to ourselves take on the challenge of changing our own consciousness proportional to the severity of the challenges, but also challenge ourselves to think in new ways. And how we do that, I'm not sure we know at the moment, because I don't see anybody doing it.
But Jim,
that's what I would be my comments on this discussion so far.
Can I just argue with you for a minute, though?
Sure.
You said,
and then we need to close out.
But the truth is, you kind of made the point right at the beginning, which is we have the tools, and we all have the capacities for love, for engagement with nature, for appreciating what we have. It's just they're not being used by a majority of people. Yeah. That's the trick, isn't it?
Yeah. And they're not being used for very clear reasons that somehow we have to work around with more innovative creativity than I think we've managed so far to change an overall global situation that seems to be getting worse and worse. So I've really been challenging all of us, David, on Humanity Rising to think more deeply, to create more almost promiscuously, so that we can somehow come up with ways to motivate people to take up the solutions that in many cases have been around for decades. That's the agony that we could solve this in a heartbeat if we would just change our consciousness about both the need and the design toward the solution, in a broken infrastructure in a broken world. So, but I really want to thank you and your panelists for everything that you've done today, and it's so good to have you and Lars back, even if by video for Lars, and look forward to having you convene more of these very thoughtful panels as we move into the future, which is only going to get more complicated. Only more complicated. So thank you so much, David, and thank you all for being on this panel. I know we went a little bit late, but it was an extraordinarily fertile conversation, and it was a good after conversation as well. So you're all welcome to the after session chat group. You'll see the link in the chat box, and then we'll see you all tomorrow for a very deep dive on what it means to be a veteran, with people dying every day in Ukraine, including Americans and Europeans and Russians, and conflicts around the world. How we empathize with our vets is a very deep issue of collective concern. So that'll be Humanity Rising tomorrow. So thank you, David. Thank you, everyone. Bye for now.